Hello, everybody. This is Charlotte Bear, Chair of Monterey Bay, California chapter of the Climate Reality Project. And this is our special training today with our trainer, Dan Linehan, who is going to be talking to us about strategies and approaches for more effective climate actions and presentations. And everyone understands that this training is being recorded. And at this point, I'm just going to say, Dan, we're going to punt it to you for your presentation, and we'll allow for a little time for question and answers afterward. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, well, thank you. Let's see. Yeah, if you could just put the questions you have in the comments, and I'll hit them afterwards. Let me see. My screens are not showing everybody, so I think it just might be easier to do this. But again, thank you for having me here. I am proud to be a new member of the Monterey Bay chapter. And it's absolutely wonderful. And so I'll talk a little bit about, my personal journey. And for those who've been trained in the past with Al Gore, we talk a little bit about personal journey. But I understand that there's probably people who may not be, trained leaders from Climate Reality, and also understand there might be people who aren't even members and might be visiting. So this is going to kind of hit kind of all the, the little check boxes. And so hopefully everybody will be able to pull something from this, even if you're a very experienced trainer. I just first like to mention, and you heard Scott say something. He's from our Climate Reality Project LA, and I just do a little promotion there. We've just done this wonderful climate literacy resolution down there, and some really amazing work. And Al Gore did this little short video. So if you guys could take a look at that, that would be great. There's some links to our committee and to see kind of the great stuff that we're doing. And I would definitely encourage you to take a look at this really short video. It's only a minute long, and share it. These are the types of things that really help even our presentation. So kind of like a presentation approach and skill set is recognizing these quick assets that we could share to promote people and our work as an organization, and just our championness of trying to solve the climate crisis. So let's just kind of get into it. I'm going to get into approaches and strategies, and I'm not going to just give you guys lists. I'm going to kind of go through like scenarios, a couple scenarios, and then I'll kind of talk about different things that are really important. And you'll hopefully be able to pick up on some of these things as I go through. But this is really not a climate talk. I'm not trying to teach you climate at this point in time. This is really, people who want to learn how to better communicate and give presentations. And we didn't do a little bit about my background, but I've been involved in climate communications for, gosh, over 20 years now. So I'm kind of pulling from stuff that I've done with Climate Reality and stuff that I've done external to Climate Reality. So you'll notice here, this is kind of a cool image, and this is an atmospheric river. We've got more experience with them much more recently, and we will get much more experience with them as the years go by with the changing climate. And as you can see, this is from a few years ago. I don't have an updated model like this from the recent hits, but we got hit pretty bad. This is in Santa Cruz, and as you know, that wharf got hit pretty bad. And back in January, when this all happened, President Biden came out to this location to visit the disaster in California. So this is our chapter now. And if you look right across the bay, then you'll see where we are. And that's the Monterey side, or some of us are anyway. This is the Monterey side. So it's kind of interesting how that national emergency in California was centered around our new chapter in a way. And it's not just the beaches that are infected. This is Salinas. This is Salinas Valley. This is right by River Road for those who know that area. And this is like the salad bowl of America. And these are fields. These are supposed to be fields that get planted. And it's devastating. This is an actual thing that's devastating our economy at this moment. And so we have to recognize that, yeah, the flood just stopped, maybe a few months ago, but the economic impacts and the impacts to people and businesses and livelihoods, that's continuing, and that's going to probably continue for many, many months, if not years, just from that one storm. I took these shots. This is kind of close to where I live. And if you look at this, it's like, wow, it's not just a bunch of boardwalks that are torn up. This is like our tourism industry. This is where we live. This stuff has to be replaced. It's going to cost somebody something, right? And so as budgets go to repair this stuff, that means that money is going to be pulled from somewhere else, right? So we're going to lose another social service. So I ask you then, everybody here, have you personally experienced severe weather yourself? What about people you know? Has it all changed over time? Have you experienced just kind of one occurrence, or have you experienced multiple occurrences? Has it been wildfires or floods? How has it impacted your life? How has it impacted the lives of others? So I'm going to go back to this slide really quickly, and you can see again, this is a model, and you'll see like the coloration shows the amount of actual moisture that's in the air. So you got this, the red and the purple areas have the most moisture. And I'm going to switch to a slide here, and I'm going to ask kind of a question to think about this. Now, this is another map that's showing density here, right? In the purples, it's really now, does anybody recognize this, or does anybody see anything that jumps out to them? And that's kind of a little bit rhetorical, because I know we're not doing audience participation right now, but this is actually smoke. And so we just saw that picture of the atmospheric river, and now we're seeing this picture of smoke. And this just happened in New York. This is the forest fires that were happening up in Canada, and they put this trail all the way down. So some of you may have seen this, some of you may not. And here, at one point in time, this was actually the worst air quality in the world, right? So this is a quote. It says, some of the highest poor air quality indexes have been recorded in New York City on Wednesday. While normal air quality index is 50, Brooklyn recorded an air quality index of 413, Queens 407. This is 800% increase over what's considered a safe level. This is in New York, right? And the fires are way up here, right? So we talking about these climate impacts, and it's like, wow, this is a whole nother country that's impacting a city. And I put this up there because I asked you guys a question about what kind of severe weather have you experienced? Well, I was in Brooklyn at this particular time, and so these are photographs of it actually happening. And I was working away. Wasn't paying attention to news. I walked out and I saw this. This is like 10 o'clock in the morning. And I was like, what the hell? I feel like I'm in California with the wildfires, and it was really disorienting. Cars are going by in the morning with their lights on, and so it was just like, it was just surreal to me, So I was actually in New York, and I was working on some climate things, and I happened to be actually working on a project for University of Georgia. And this is a headline. I'm not sure if you guys have seen this. Whether to blame for roughly 90% of Georgia's peach crop being destroyed, right? So here I am in New York. That's happening. I'm working on a project for University of Georgia. This thing comes out, and it's basically saying Georgia peaches will be hard to find this summer. Bad weather pretty much wiped out this year's crop. And it wasn't just Georgia. It's South Carolina as well got impacted as well. So when we look at these impacts, it's tremendous when you start to connect them. It's not just singular events. These are not just like, oh, I got a flood here, I got this here, I got that. They're interconnected. They interconnect us, businesses, all aspects of our lives more and more. And then so we ask this question: so why has so little progress been made in face of such a catastrophe as this climate crisis is? So I'm going to show one more picture. And for those of you in Monterey, you might recognize this a few years ago. This is the Brennis Fire. And this is one of my favorite photographs for many reasons. You can see the Milky Way here, but I felt that this is such an exemplary photograph of the problem, where you can see the fire and the smoke from the fire is just blotting out the beautiful stars, And so I was on the actual opposite side of this when the fire broke out, and I had to cross it in order to get back home. So again, something that was, and again, at one point in time, this was the largest forest fire and the most expensive forest fire and damaging forest fire that we've had in California at that point, but it's been replaced. So I'm going to ask you this question. Is there a moment, an event, or something else that triggered you to feel that climate change was a very serious problem, right? So how would you describe this? And again, thinking about these questions are going to be really important to your work when you communicate climate, because it's not just about throwing about a bunch of factoids, right? When we just hear a whole bunch of data, we just see a whole bunch of slides, a whole bunch of bullet points, You know, it's not high cognitive learning, right? We want people to understand stuff. So we want them to engage, we want them to connect, we want them to start putting things together, we want them to understand. And how we present stuff really makes a huge difference. And it's like education. You know, we have teachers on this call right now, and that's exactly what they're trying to do, right? It's not about teaching a bunch of facts. We want their students to understand what they're actually looking at and think for themselves. So our most effective climate presentations will have those elements in it. So for me, this is and this is great. I'm so excited to do this for Monterey Bay because I've got some Monterey Bay slides in here that I've been using for years and years and years, and I get to use them for people who are like, you know, in the Monterey Bay chapter now. And so you guys can feel free to use some of this stuff if you like. But when the Larsen B disintegrated, this was my climate moment. This is when the light bulb hit me, and all of a sudden this thing happened, and I was looking at the satellite images, and in just 35 days. This huge piece of ice just disintegrated, and it was 1,255 square miles. And I figured it out. I did the aerial computations. It's 6 times larger than the Monterey Bay, bounded by Point Pinos, which is on the tip of Monterey, and Point Santa Cruz, which is the tip of Santa Cruz. 6 times larger than that area, disintegrated in 35 days. And I was like, wow, something is wrong. And I use that as like the motivation to really change course in my life and my work. And again, Antarctica, boy, it had an increase of 4.5 degrees over the last 50 years, and that's 5 times faster than the rest of the world. So back then, I'm like, something's squirrely going on, and I need to check it out. So I planned to do an expedition to get out there myself, and I ended up finally being able to do it in 2006. But something really interesting happened after I made that trip. I got a chance to see an inconvenient truth. Now, I was already on my way to, you know, planning to go to Antarctica to study climate change when this came out. And wow, it caused me to like look at things in such a different perspective, a wide view. It really opened my eyes even further. You know, it just gave me these tools to understand that what's happening. And so that was an amazing thing, and actually was on this little ship crossing over the ocean to get to Antarctica, and I rewatched The Inconvenient Truth, which is a special moment for me. And so again, I got a chance to get up there, see some crazy things, lots of penguins and glaciers, but I was there to study climate and the impact of wildlife, and it was evident. It was everywhere. There's some icebergs we crossed through. We even ran over icebergs, and that's kind of somewhat normal. But this is pretty much, I think, to me, one of my favorite shots that I really want you guys to take home. This is one of the mountains. This is continental Antarctica. These over here are tiny zodiacs that take us back and forth to you know, our expedition ship. And I'm basically hiked up this mountain, the side of the mountain, with my guide and another member of the team. She's actually the medical staff. So us 3 hiked up the glacier, and if you notice, our guide wasn't even wearing a shirt. It was that hot up there, and it was just astounding. You know, it's like you can't make that stuff up. So in 2013, that's when I actually got involved with the Climate Reality Project, because I wanted to do something. I felt that I needed to do something more. You know, it wasn't just about doing that writing project I was hoping to do. And so I joined up in 2012. And but as a writer, I wasn't just going to join for the training part of it. I wanted to use my skills and my profession to actually leverage that and make even a bigger impact. So I took the training, and a month later, I did a cover story about severe weather for the Monterey Weekly for all you Monterey residents. You're familiar with the paper. So I got a chance to do that and kind of do a little bit more outreach, and kind of, again, try to get the message out any way we can. A month later, Superstorm Sandy hit. And if you remember our Inconvenient Truth, you know, Al Gore talks about the flooding, what would possibly happen, you know, to New York, you know, for sea level rise. But Superstorm Sandy hit, and it was an extremely unique storm, and it caused flooding very similar to what Al Gore was saying would happen in 2006. I'm from Long Island, and my brother, who I was actually visiting in Brooklyn, you know, when the latest storm happened, he lost his studio. You know, he lost, you know, the CBS studio that he worked at. when the storm happened. But so what does all this have to do with giving presentations? Now, again, we have a mixture of people here. Some people are climate reality, some are leaders, some are just members of the new chapter, and some aren't. But we all will talk about climate. We all will give presentations. And so for those of you who are trained leaders, we've all gotten our slides when we got trained. It's a huge deck. And then there's the Truth in 10, which is a little bit smaller deck. And there's other different groupings of slides that over the years people have put together. And so what we do is, what I do is you could see just a sampling of some of the talks that I've given. I've given talks to, this is a preschool I gave a talk to. This was college students during Earth Day at UC Santa Cruz. This was for a literature talk on climate. So all these kind of talks, I'm trying to squeeze in climate as best I can to hit an audience that maybe not be familiar with certain aspects of it or think of it in certain ways. So what we do is we go through our slides and we kind of just pick and pull what we can, and the idea is not to try to cram everything in there. We just want to try to get a few slides or a couple sets of slides that will really make the right impact. For example, when I talked to recently the teachers at LAUSD, I gave a severe weather talk to the teachers who are now going to start implementing this climate literacy program in Los Angeles. And so I pulled a bunch of severe weather storms slides from my climate reality material. And, I just plugged these things in. They fit really well. They fit into my talk. I'm not going to go over each of these, but you guys will probably be familiar with some of these. And, I'll pull updated ones, but sometimes there'll be slides that I really like that I'm going to keep in and just continue to use. So here's an example of one that I really like that no longer is given in our normal slide decks for like the new trainees. But I was actually here in Argentina the time that this happened. So I had gone back to Argentina to continue my climate work with the Antarctica and Argentina regions. And I happened to be down there working on a book when the worst storm in the history of the city hit. And it was insane. So here we have an actual slide, and I can actually supplement that by showing, hey, this is a photograph. That's my photograph that I took. It looked like these cars were boats. And here's photographs from the local papers. And here's data. It rained over 15 inches in less than a day. And the city just didn't have the capability to withstand that. And so it's funny, if you look, it's a modern city, right? And here's the ring of the city. And outside, there were very few people reported dead. And the thing that people said was that the poor must be salamanders because none of the poor died. But that was not true. There's officially 51 victims, but I know people who were doctors, and they said the morgues were full. So anyway, you could see how this then led to opportunities. I was already trained from Al Gore. And so when that happened, hey, I had my slides and I was giving talks to the community. So right away, I took advantage of the material that I had from Climate Reality, and I put it into action immediately when this storm happened. And like I said, I did a talk at the local university. It's supposed to be 45 minutes. My Spanish is not that very good. And I ended up talking for 2.5 hours. They just would not let me go. Again, we plug in our slides as we need. We've got a couple of things that talk about the cost. Now, this is an interesting one. Extreme weather costs in the United States exceeded a record of 742 billion. This is an old slide. This number is ticking up. And just be aware of that. So when we're showing slides again, be aware that this is just a snapshot, especially on the year that you're using the slide. These things get updated, and you might want to keep in mind that some things should be updated, some things maybe not, but this number is increasing. So approaches and strategies. You heard me talk a bit about some of the things I've experienced, and that's kind of integrating a personal story, but it's not enough just to kind of just give your life history. What you're really trying to do is you're trying to get people to connect. And we want people to be like, oh yeah, I've seen something like that. Oh yeah, that's happened to me. Or how does this relate to me? What difference does it make? So you were in Argentina, what the hell does that matter to me, right? So what we try to do is not just throw it all out in the front. As we give our talk, you want to just keep going back to some of these things. Like, oh yeah, you remember that when I was in Brooklyn, oh yeah, that happened with the superstorm Sandy. So you can go back and forth and keep that interconnection going, and that's really important to find that common ground. You're always looking for that common ground and how to connect to your audience on that. Just like I did, I showed you 3 or 4 different examples of stuff that I've been experienced, but I'm sure some of this stuff you've also been through as well. So one of the important things I think is, again, as a climate communicator, fundamentally, we're always going up against some misinformation, some misconceptions, some downright, lies. And I think one of the chief things we could do is disarm some of those main things. And there's a couple different good ways to do it. I'm going to give you a couple examples right here. So I'm going to go through this kind of fast. Again, because I'm not here to teach you this right now. I'm kind of here just to show you an example of some of the things that you can do. Now you'll notice that these are a bunch of custom slides because I've been doing this for a really long time. So my recommendation is, as you get more and more used to giving talks, you pull more and more of your own work in, and stuff that you feel works and connects. And like, we have a medical doctor with us, Don, right? And so Don is got experience with medicine in a way that I would never have it. I would never give medical slides up here, but I could imagine, if you're giving a talk to doctors at the healthcare field, or he's giving his personal story, he should absolutely put slides in there that he knows can connect to his audience, and that is his passion and his profession, and it's got his interests. So going back to this, one of the biggest things is that we hear is, oh, how could possibly climate change happen? The earth is the sky is gigantic. It's not possible. But again, just to remind you that, most of the atmosphere is nitrogen and oxygen. A tiny percent, 1%, is all of the other gases, including carbon dioxide, which is the greenhouse, and other greenhouse gases. And you could see here that this is an incredibly thin layer. And I have here a picture of a cross section. This is kind of more sciencey. I would talk about this a little bit more detail. But then I start showing some reference points, like, wow, 62 miles, that's the start of space. This is where the ozone layer is, and this is where the hole in the ozone problem happens, right? But most of the mass of the air is only in the first 5 to 9 miles of our atmosphere. 5 to 9 miles, right? This is where the airliners fly. This is where weather happens. This is where the greenhouse effect occurs. Climate change does not happen all the way up here. Climate change only happens here, right? And that's a small level. And that's, again, a fundamental thing that people, don't understand. And that's why it's so hard for people to think that we can actually make a problem. So being here in Monterey, I made another visual on this to help really kind of drive this point home, right? So the distance from Monterey, across Monterey, from Point Pinos to Point Santa Cruz, we talked about that already, is about 22 miles, right? And you can see on a map. So remember I told you that well, here's a picture of the atmospheric river. That's where that happened, that picture right there. Here's the fields in Salinas where the flooding happened. So again, to orient you guys on the map, here's where I took photographs of that broken up boardwalk, right? But again, we know that the troposphere, right, it ranges between 5 and 9 miles up. So let's put on the map, we're standing right here in the middle, all right? Let's put up that range. So 5 miles would be anything in this middle circle, and 9 miles would be anything within this outer circle. So that means all climate change is happening in around this small area. Could you imagine if we couldn't see past 5 or 9 miles? That means I could barely see into across the bay. That's how small it is. And so again, this is another way of visualizing how small the atmosphere is. And again, in that little tiny bit, we're putting 152 million tons every 24 hours. And again, this is one of those numbers that every time we get a new set of slides, this number unfortunately keeps ticking up. So And another thing, what I'll do sometimes in an actual demonstration where we've got people in there, I'll bring my little globe and I'll show, you know what? The atmosphere is about the layer of a plastic bag around a globe or basketball, right? And that's what's happening. There's the global warming. There's climate change happening right there. So we've seen atmospheric problems before and we solved them. Again, this is something that's a really powerful thing to talk to people too. It's not like, oh, we can't fix it. It's impossible to solve, right? That is such a misconception because we've done it when we put our mind to it. So for example, hole in the ozone layer, right? This is a really substantial problem. You know, I'm not going to go into the details, but the type of UV that comes in there, it damages DNA. If we didn't have that ozone layer, life as we know it would probably not exist because our cellular structure would not survive the UV that comes through. We started to get a hole in the ozone layer. We noticed it, and then we stopped using the chemicals that caused it. And little by little, that hole is repairing, right? So again, recognize a really big problem, and then we come up with a solution. We implement it through policy, and we started to see change. I'm from the Northeast, the East Coast. We used to have something acid rain all the time. That's because again, poor regulations let all this chemicals into the air and actually created acid, right? But what did we do? We realized this is pretty bad for everything. It's bad for the trees. It's bad for the fish. It's bad for infrastructure, everything. We put regulations in place, and guess what? We solved the problem, right? So we can do it. Even smog in LA, this is a great example, right? This is the amount of gasoline used in Los Angeles from the 60s to 2010, right? So you see that, oh my gosh, there's more and more gasoline being used in LA, which of course makes sense. It's getting more and more crowded. But what's happening is the amount of smog is actually decreasing. So how do we have more cars now and less smog than way back in 1960? How is that possible? Well, we recognize the problem. We put restrictions on emissions in cars, and boom, we solved the problem. This is an atmospheric problem, and we solved it. The other thing, again, I'm going to quickly go through things too. These are all, remember I was telling you, it's a difference between just giving a bunch of factoids and then showing connections and making things click in people's minds, right? So again, we want to say, things obey the laws of physics, right? So it makes sense if you burn more, right? More of it goes into the atmosphere. We know about the greenhouse effect. So if more goes into the atmosphere, we expect the temperature to go up. Now, if the temperature is going up, does ice melt or does ice freeze? We would expect more ice to melt, and we see that data going up. So we see all these independent sets of data all trending in the way that makes sense. Again, this is a very powerful thing to talk to people about, and so they can see that, oh, it's just not temperature. It's not like temperature's going up, but the emissions are going down, right? Everything fits the laws of physics. Really important. Watch out for cherry picking data. This is another thing. I really love this little demonstration. Is again, if you look at the carbon dioxide for the last 400 years, you could see if you look in this little range, sure enough, carbon dioxide is going down, and you'd be right to say, oh my gosh, well, carbon dioxide is going down. But when you look at a longer period, you see that, well, it actually, there's a natural cycle to carbon dioxide. But that's not the full picture. The full picture is this is where we are right now. And then you could say, okay, well, if we only look at this little range, it's about similar to these other things. Well, that's right, natural cycle, blah, 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 blah. But the problem is that's not the full picture, right? What's the current concentration now? You can go to NASA, you can get this information. It's updated all the time. And current concentration is up here. So really, this is not natural at all. So when people talk about this natural cycle, it's nothing but baloney, right? There's nothing natural about that. Nothing in the last 400 years, 400,000 years, right? We can even go back further to 800,000 and still nothing close, right? So I'm going to pass through this really quickly. I've got links that I could pass on to you guys that have like little modules that go into this a little more detail and a little slower. But really what I'm trying to do is not teach you this at the moment, is to show you some strategies as you think and give your presentations and you talk about stuff, how you can actually disarm some of the denial and the misinformation that's out there. Again, interconnections are so important. Visualizations and mental maps. People see stuff, right? Some people may hear very well and get it, but a lot of times, a lot of people, when they see those connections, it's when it really clicks. So for example, I'm going to tie some things I just talked about. We know the atmosphere is thin. We know that we put 152 million tons of greenhouse gas into the air. We know we've had atmospheric problems in the past, whether it's ozone, acid rain, smog. We know that we found the problems. We understood how to fix it. And then we implemented fixes and they started to recover, right? We know that trends obey the laws of physics, and we know climate change is not natural, right? So this is a tremendous kind of connection, because you're like, wow, holy moly, that all makes sense to me now. I get it, you know? So things like that can be really important, again, in your work, to tie things together. And you may not do it as complicated as me or as nice as me. I mean, I make my living, you know, in multimedia and storytelling. So the stuff I do is going to be advanced. But when I first started doing this, you know, it wasn't advanced. So give yourself permission to start off slow and build, and just slowly make your stuff a little more advanced and a little more advanced. And that's just how we do anything with experience. So that's really important. So again, involve and connect to your audience. As much as possible, you know, keep things clear and keep it simple. You know, we're talking about a severely difficult thing, and there's no way we should or can cover every aspect of it. And if we try, people are going to walk away just you know, unable to just think about anything, because they're just so inundated with stuff. And it's not simple stuff, it's difficult stuff to hear, right? So we really have to pick and choose our battles. We can't cram everything in there. And even though you have a Truth in 10, for example, which is Al Gore's 10-minute slideshow, it never lasts 10 minutes. And that's Al Gore doing it, who's an absolute expert. They're his personal slides. I'm showing you a lot of my personal slides, so I can move through them really quick because I know them well. But when you try to do that, if you're not really comfortable with all that material, you know, that Truth in 10 could take you 10 minutes, but it could take you 30 minutes to properly give that. So maybe not give it all. Give the slides you're comfortable with, and support the message that you're trying to go through. If you're talking to a business group, you know, pull out the more business related slides. Give yourself the chance to succeed. Give yourself the chance to connect with the audience, and keep it as simple as possible, because there's a lot of complexity that's naturally built in. So don't sabotage yourself by creating more problems than there needs to be. This is again, connecting with people. The river fire, another fire that happened. This is me driving down from Monterey. I have a friend who I'm actually getting ready to have to go out back to this ranch again. But I had to help evacuate animals. I had to help evacuate people. You can hardly see it, but that's a 747 right there that's flying by, dropping water. And this is on our backyard, you know. And how many times do we have to keep seeing this, you know? And so as I'm driving along, I saw Smokey the Bear, you know, and this is right by a little tiny fire station. And the arrow is not even in the red danger zone, right? And we have this giant fire. And I just took that picture as I'm driving along, right, trying not to crash. I'm like, oh crap, I got to take this picture. But think about this. Think about what a story this tells right here, you know? And so these are the moments that I want you guys to be aware of and be on the lookout for when you see something like this, because it helps tell the story. It helps connect. You know, when I sit there and say, wow, it's not even in the red, you know, you're like, oh, wow, that means it must be really bad. So this is another thing I was looking at, you know, got out to kind of take a look, take some photographs of the fire. And I see this on the guy's shirt. And I'm like, whoa, the future is on Mars. Now, if you want to talk about, like, I don't know, it's another little surreal thing. let's certainly hope the future is not on Mars. Let's try to stop burning our planet. Let's try to actually try to save it so we don't have to go to a dead planet. Let's not kill our planet, right? So this is from the Climate Reality Project again. So I showed some simple things. Now let's show a little bit of trend again. So we just know the hotter things get, the more likely fires are going to happen. Really does, that's why you take a match. When you take a match and you put it on a piece of paper, that paper gets hotter and hotter and hotter until it finally goes on fire, right? And so the hotter it is, the more likely it's going to go on fire, right? So it makes perfect sense that we get more wildfires, right? It's nothing magic about that science. I actually contacted CAL FIRE for this diagram. And so this is an interesting thing. And this is a bit old now because this is from 2020. So it's the 20 largest fires, right? So if you look at the 20 largest fires, right, it shows in size in acres, right? And you could see this and you kind of take a look. It runs from 1932 to 2020. About a quarter, let's say about like a sixth of this, all of the top 20 fires happened from 1932 to 1999. Less than half then happened from 2000 to 2019. A little bit less than half all happened in a single year. So if you talk about acceleration, if you talk about trends, we got a little bit here, we got a lot more in this region, but 1 year. So you're going to tell me that this is natural? This is natural? There's no way this is natural. This is absolutely not natural. The data shows it right here. So one last, we're getting close to the end, and I want to then just quickly say, hey, do not do all doom and gloom. Here's an example of a talk I did for preschool, and I can't talk to kids that age about these really difficult topics. But what I can do is I can talk about silly penguins. I could show them silly photographs, and I can say, hey, you guys like penguins, right? What do we have to do to keep these guys alive and thriving? And we have to protect where they live. We have to protect what they eat. And so the kids get it. So this is another thing I usually leave with this video. It's a short video. It's maybe a couple minutes long, and I'm not going to play it now, but I really encourage you to play this. And it's a little clip called "I Will Be a Hummingbird," and it's meant to be very uplifting, because in the time when we're seeing all these fires, this little video shows how just this little hummingbird is trying to put out, the fires by doing the best that it can, while all the rest of the bigger animals are just standing by and watching, right? So we really need to figure out ways to add humor, to add fun, to add something interesting that kind of reduce the despair and all the negative side effects that happen when you talk to somebody as serious as climate change. And as serious, I mean, everything that you guys hear, it's probably 5 to 10 times worse, right? The people who are working on this stuff behind the doors, where you're not here, where you're not, it's not getting out to the press, it's worse, right? And so what do? You tell people that, our job is to communicate things. Our job is to communicate how bad this is, because the press is generally not going to cover things in a way that's detailed enough or thorough enough to really understand the scope. And that's where we come in, but we also cannot scare people to death. So it's a really interesting balance that we have to do. And part of that is not giving everything, trying to, force feed everything to your audience when you give a talk. Create advantages and take opportunities. Again, I showed you this picture with Al Gore, this video. Hey, doing some great work with, LAUSD and their climate literacy program for K through 12, promote this stuff. This is an example of where we can actually help make solutions. This is an example where there's good green jobs. This is a good example where our kids will be better equipped to survive and work and thrive in an environment where climate change is happening. Not only that, they'll be better equipped in business. When it's time for them to get jobs, have families, and support them, they'll be better equipped when they have proper education and training. And then lastly is storytelling. I think, you could probably get a good picture that, storytelling is important. And as we do it, there's like the big picture, there's like the mini stories that we have, throughout the presentation. We just try to find ways to connect. And that's kind of what I went down to Argentina and Antarctica in the first place, is to write. And so, I put a lot of the stuff I'm telling you now into a book that I had recently published. So I try to, take my experiences and not just do talks, but anywhere I can, I try to move that climate into my work. And I think everybody could do that, no matter what your profession is. So with that, and there's also, you could check out the trailer on that too. So I encourage you to take a look at that. So for now, I'll stop there, and then I kind of open it to questions.
Thanks, Dan. If we can go back to gallery view, that would be great.
Sure.
See if I can do that.
Yeah, I think you might be able to. I'm gonna.
Yeah, you've got to stop sharing. That's the only thing. Yeah.
Okay, stop sharing.
And we are still recording so that we can capture a few of the questions. Okay.
Oh, there we go.
There
Okay,
we
I think
go.
that's
Awesome.
Ooh.
Awesome. Okay. And folks, I would invite us to think about what's in the chat. I'll go ahead and go through that. We're not going to be talking about Speakers Bureau things at large or other planning things right now. We're just focusing on this training presentation. I thought that was wonderful. Thank you so much for that. I also it's a lot. And I really appreciate how you're very personalized photographs, showing what happened to the Bay coincides with the launch of this chapter. So thank you for pointing that out at the time of this airing.
Yeah, and I just want to add, I mean, don't feel overwhelmed, because if you could just take a couple of these points and just take some of it and little by little add to it. It's about continuous improvement, right? It's about continuous improvement in our lives, or anything that we do. It's going to be very hard for some people to kind of all of a sudden do a presentation like I've done, because this is what I kind of, again, I mentioned, this is what I do for a living, and so why wouldn't I put all that effort into the work that I do? And so everybody's got different talents and different skills, and you don't have to put that pressure on yourself to make something look perfect, because really we're out here doing the best that we can with the time that we have, the resources that we have, to try to connect with people.
Dan, I'm seeing in the chat a theme of questions. Several people have asked if you're willing to share these slides, and that kind of brings me to the larger question of what is proprietary and can be shared with everybody, and what it cannot be shared with everybody, and what is generally available. So with your presentation, you've taken some photos, you have some data slides, you've got some things from Climate Reality.
It's well, first off, as Climate Reality, right, we're not allowed to charge, right? So we're not getting paid for our type of stuff. So this is educational. So that's one thing, right? So we need to consider that. The other thing too is, like, we have to be careful about taking people's work. I think there's always important, like, there's some gray areas, right? Take just arbitrarily pulling some stuff. I know people tend to do that in certain ways. I work in publishing, and I tend not to pull people's personal stuff. I'll take something from news. I try to take stuff from that's like NASA, which is public domain, unless that that the person is willing to is okay with doing that. So I don't mind people sharing my material. That's not a problem. Now, Climate Reality, is everybody here Climate Reality?
No, I don't believe everybody on this
Okay.
has already undergone the training with Climate
Okay.
Reality. Is that correct? We have some people who have not.
Okay, so what I'll say is that like the slides that we get, yes, we're only really supposed to, the people who are trained are really only ones kind of allowed to show them, and so it's kind of a bit tricky. Obviously, there's some judgment that you have to have. Like I said, if you're not trying to profit from it, and you're careful of what copyrights are, if you're working in the capacity of Climate Reality, boy, like I said, sorry to give you this meandering answer, but the problem is it's like Wild West right now with with internet and people sharing and taking stuff, and it's never a problem until it's a problem, right? And that's what happens. All of a sudden someone sees something and you get like you're hearing about these people being sued for songs and all kinds of crazy stuff. I would just say be respectful, mind that there are things like copyrights. Try to always avoid a problem if you can by sticking with like NASA and government stuff, because number one, they're going to be more authentic anyway. Because I don't use, like, just because someone writes something on their website about climate, I'm not going to use that, because that's not that may not be a source that is verified. And so I'm never going to give a source out there that is like a hearsay, even if I might, so the idea is like you want to make sure that you're giving data that is like beyond reproach, right? And that's really where what you also want to have there. And if you're uncertain, don't put it in. It's simple as that. There's a million things you can cover. If there's something that you think is just don't put it in. Put something else instead. There's plenty of room to talk on other things. But you could use, like I said, I'll make slides available to people. I have in the past. Some of these slides, like especially the scenarios, I have done that for the Bay Area chapter, where I've kind of made them a section of slides that people can use for their own thing. You just hope that people leave your name on it, because you put a lot of work into it, and it's kind of credit. So you want to credit where credit is due. And then again, each of those, I put a bunch of little video modules too, so those are also on YouTube. So they're free to use and show and share. So for example, if you like the thing about the thinness of the atmosphere layer, I have a little module that's only a couple minutes that covers that. So you're also free to use that. That's a long answer. Let's move on to something else.
But actually, thank you as for our chair, for our speaker core, in our chapter. One thing I can say is, for those of you who haven't yet been trained with climate reality, that's one of the things you do, is you get access to a lot of this, and then you continue to get access to updated slide decks that are carefully vetted. And that's the whole communication agreement you sign on to as a certified climate reality leader, is that your responsibility is going to be going out to share appropriate and correct information. And that all reflects back on Al Gore, which is why it's sensitive. So if you use climate reality stuff, you really need to leave it as they've done it. The most current, you don't tamper with the slides they've done. It's copyrighted, proprietary, and you have to attribute. If you're going to use slides that someone like in our own chapter, who's an educator and a speaker advisor, is providing for us through our own Box account, you need to attribute it to Dan, because he put that together and he's a climate communicator. So those kinds of ethics apply. And if you aren't yet a trained climate reality leader, we're going to encourage you to get that training as soon as it's available to you, of course. And we'll want to buddy you up with a climate reality leader to go out for a presentation. And as we make things available around campaigns and stuff, you can access them through our chapter account. But again, we encourage you to employ these strategies that Dan's talking about. Share your own climate impact, share your climate story, help people connect the dots. And some of the data slides, pick a few that help you, but don't necessarily rely upon the PowerPoint as much in the beginning. I don't know, Dan, if you want to add on to that.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. I know that, like, I was giving presentations on climate before I joined Climate Reality. So some of you who aren't part of it, yeah, feel free to keep doing what you're doing. Pull stuff in that you can. Hopefully, a training like this will help anybody else. So people who might be involved in the local climate, other climate groups, hopefully this is helpful, to your work also. It's just that, we have our own little group. If you're in Citizens Climate Lobby, you've got your own little slides there too. If you're in, Sunrise, you probably got your own slides too. So everybody's got their own little things that they'll be doing for their work. But hopefully this talk transcends that. So.
I see other questions about networking, and we're not going to discuss that on the recorded training. So are there other questions for Dan with respect to the training itself?
Yeah, I know it's a lot, but feel free to. Nan, do you have?
Well, I actually have. Well, thank you so much for what you've done. I have a comment to add. If I
Sure.
just and I haven't given that many presentations. I was trained in 2015, and but what I just wanted to say was that to me, back then my struggle was coming up with the solutions. You know what to tell my guests, my audience, to do about it. It seemed, honestly, in 2015, I felt really rather hopeless about it at times. And I feel like that's one of the things that we have to, depending on your audience, that we have to deal with is that kind of aspect of despair or overwhelm, things like that. But what I wanted to say is myself at this point, I feel so hopeful from the current legislation and the training I just went through with about the Inflation Reduction Act and the infrastructure and what we can do in this country right now. We have a lot of tools to work with and a lot of specific things to suggest to folks, as well as there's much more to do, right? I mean, continued legislation that we need on a state level, all kinds of things, or local. But I feel like there's a lot of really positive stuff to share now. So I just wanted to like throw that in.
Yeah.
It's a excite. It's I feel more like it's to me almost like an easier time than it was say like 8 years ago
Mm,
to be presenting about this, and just that the research that I've read shows that we want to actually spend more of the time, right, focusing on solutions. Like it's a balance, or you're gonna have to figure that out for your audience, right? Because
right. It'll depend on your audience, right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So why
it
don't you
really
talk
will.
about that? How you've made that decision, or how you do that, how you
Yeah.
find the balance?
Well, yes. So the balance, like I said, it is really important, and it'll be super audience dependent. And like, so for example, you might be giving a business group a talk, right? And you've got X amount of time, and so you want to focus on what potentially could be business opportunities, right? So give them maybe a little bit of it. You don't have to necessarily get into like, some of the stuff that I've done. You would do something along those lines. So that would be, you know more audience dependent, but like for any talk, again, I think you have to give them solutions, you have to give them hope, you have to, mix stuff in there. Now, that is critical, and that balance will really be, I think it'll be dependent upon your content. It'll be again dependent upon your audience. If I'm giving a talk to teachers, and again, I just recently gave 3 talks to the LA teachers for their, the training that they're doing, the climate literacy people. Now, I gave a severe weather talk, and I gave a climate basics talk, and then I gave a communications talk. Um, I didn't have time to go through solutions, right? I only had an hour, and so my talk wasn't about greenhouse. What can we do with green technology? And so I had to manage that, and I had to sit there and say, but we have solutions. So my percentage of solutions on those things were really small, because that's not the purpose of my talk. My talk was to talk about basics, fundamentals that a lot of these teachers didn't have. Now, if I gave only half that, then it would be half as prepared. So what we hope is that other people gave a talk on that technology, right? So again, it really just depends. And but if it is a talk that you think that doesn't really connect anything, like there's no other training, it's really important to have that. I remember that hummingbird thing. I really hope you guys see that. And hopefully, I didn't get a chance to kind of get some of these links, all the stuff put together. I had little technical difficulties getting online, unfortunately. But that hummingbird, I remember I showed that at CSUMB, which is the local college, here, and it was just years ago. This was probably like 2013, 2014 or something like that. It was a long time ago. And I gave a severe weather talk. And afterwards, I'm looking at these college students, and they are all just like, they're not liking life at this point. And so I showed that hummingbird story. And again, please see it, because it's just marvelous. It's just such a wonderful, uplifting thing. And it shows the power of just being able to just, make a difference. So a woman came up after me with the students. She said, my father, my grandfather used to tell me that story when I was a kid. And when he passed away, at his funeral, a whole bunch of hummingbirds were flying over. And she was telling me this in tears, and I mean, those are the important things. Those are things like, so I put that on my talk for a reason, to give people hope. And so, without hope, boy, we're in trouble. So Nan, yeah, we really gotta make sure we're good with that.
And thank you. Nan was also asking, as a follow-up to this, when you've had a chance to breathe after the fact, if you're willing to share with the chapter, the links in an email follow-up to some of the YouTubes or whatever slides you're willing to share. If you send that to the chapter email, we'll make sure it gets available and out. And I just wanted to chime in on the psychology of hope. Hopelessness, and see if you resonate, so often is associated with a kind of despair from a feeling of powerlessness to affect any positive outcome. And so empowerment, for me, ends up being the thing I want to leave people with in any presentation. And I don't do PowerPoints as much anymore. I do podcasts and broadcasty things, but leaving people with a sense of, this is what you can do on an individual level. This is what you can do on an institutional level if you're part of a group, and that will depend on the audience I'm talking to. And this is what we can do on a systemic level. But it's like, how am I able to respond now and feel empowered to do something that's going to have a positive difference, is what I always think about trying to leave people with. Because otherwise, like Dan says, you kind of sweep the floor and they're left feeling, if I'm not empowered to make any positive change or even know what to do or where to go, that's a feeling of hopelessness. Yeah. Do we have any other?
Yeah, Kurt. Hi, Kurt.
How you doing, Dan? It's good to see you.
Good to see you.
Yeah. I didn't get a chance to sit in on the earlier part of your presentation, and I'm not exactly sure how long the training is. I've been leading the Peacemakers Circles and Network and the Peace Labs presentations for Humanity Rising Global Solutions. I'd love to have you and or some people that you may feel are the best presenters on an hour-and-a-half kind of a program on Humanity Rising, as well as there's something called the 99 Days to Peace Through Unity. And that is starting off this weekend. And we can still get you and or maybe some other cadre of people presenting over that 99 days and in the final session, so to speak, of that week that is presented. And that way we can move and groove on the climate issue of creating peace in the planet.
Can I just stop right there and say, is everybody okay with stopping the recording at this point? Are all the questions done about the training itself? And then that way we can have discussion around some of these other things. Does that feel right?
Yeah, I'm happy again to stick around and answer as many questions as people have. So
okay, thank you. I'm going to go ahead and I just stopped the recording, but
sure. And I'll give you my email, so if people have other things that they want to follow up personally, they can.
Yeah, I mean, the group will continue, but I'm just stopping the recording part. Okay.